Oh, well, we will start Tihei Moriora, Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Very glad to welcome you here on behalf of AgriTech New Zealand and MBIE. The topic for the day is, and the challenge for today is looking at forming a reference group to progress some projects on AgriTech skills and workforce requirements. So we'll go in some detail on that. Today we'll be mostly hearing from myself, as he says to try and move the slides that are not moving for him for some reason. There we go. You'll mostly be hearing from myself with Darius Pashka from MB supporting any questions or discussion that we'd like to have, and some opening comments from Kenneth Arns, the chair of AgriTech New Zealand. During the session today, please feel free to use the chat to swap some ideas or any comments or thoughts that you have. We'll be capturing those, and it would be great to capture any thoughts that you have as we're working through this topic. And if you have specific questions that you'd like to ask, use the Q&A function, and we'll be able to go through that as well. So to kick us off, I'd just like to hand over to Kenneth and to have some opening comments.
Thank you, Brendan. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. This is one in quite a series. We've recently completed an in-person series around New Zealand in 11 cities. And this is one of two this week, another one tomorrow on data standards, which is a very popular topic. But a very important topic is skills and workforce dynamics generally in the sector. So I'd like to just take a very short period of time, just a couple of minutes, and really just lay out a bit of context. As you will all be well aware, the AgriTech industry transformation plan is well embedded, it's well funded, it's working well. There are multiple work streams, multiple industry reference groups, and there is a significant amount of momentum across the sector. Earlier today, as just another dimension, Brendan and I, with Peter N. Hilton, met with my opposite number at Oz AgriTech Australia, Andrew Coppin, and Brendan's opposite, Tori Kirk, who's the new Executive Director of Oz AgriTech. And that's just one more example of another dimension that's coming into play, coming into force. We think we've got granular insights, we've got corporate insights, we've got technology insights, we've got our eye set on global markets and all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of activity happening and a lot of momentum being gained. Specifically today, though, we're looking at workforce dynamics and skill availability, not just about immediate tactical issues like immigration legislation and so on, but more particularly to take perhaps a short, a medium and a longer term view as to how we can ensure that the talent that we need is both available in the shorter term and is also being nurtured and brought through the industry to be able to support the growth of the primary sector. And as AgriTech New Zealand very much is focused on, we're here for two purposes. One is to facilitate production and profitability and sustainability in farming in the primary sector with farmers and growers, but we're also here to build AgriTech as a sector in and of itself. So thank you for your attendance. With that introduction, I'll be happy to hand over to Brendan and would you like to take over from here? And we're looking forward to what you've got to share with us today, Brendan. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kenneth. So just to complete that sort of introduction to the group, I'm just noticing there's a very slow reply to these slides that are not moving to me. Don't you love it when the tech team get together and the tech doesn't work? Let me have a look here. Thank you for bearing with me for 1 second. My screen has frozen and slides aren't changing. I presume they're not changing for you guys either. No. Here we go. Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see how quickly the slides do change. So the objective today is to prompt some discussion on skill requirements specifically for AgriTech. Maybe we'll have a little bit of thought, and would appreciate your thought on how those requirements might differ from other sectors in engineering and digital, and we'll raise some hypotheses on that we'd appreciate some thought and discussion on through the chat. Because we had so many registrants, we have had to move to this webinar format. But the whole point of today, of course, is as well as raising those discussions, is actually seek expressions of interest to join a skills reference group to support MB in the work that we're going to be doing at looking at those specific requirements for skills development for AgriTech businesses. And we'll talk about some of the context for that. So today we're seeking expressions of interest. You'll receive an expressions of interest form and a terms of reference for what we're talking about. We'll cover that today. And the main output that we'd like is to hear from you about whether you'd like to take part going forward, or other people that you believe should be taking part going forward. And then the ongoing work will be that representative group to progress the work on behalf of the industry in partnership with MB and government. AgriTech New Zealand, very quickly, just in case some of you are not aware, obviously we are a membership organisation. Our role is to connect, promote and advocate for the sector. Really, we want to combine both the shared interests and the collective ambition for what AgriTech can really mean for New Zealand, both in terms of its contribution to New Zealand primary industry and also as a sector itself in terms of exports. And so a lot of the work that we do there is advocating on behalf of our sector and our members and partnering with government, which is where the Industry Transformation Plan came from. We do various reports. We maintain relationships with many groups around the world, as Kenneth mentioned, partnerships that we're developing with Oz AgriTech and looking at how we can support each other and create opportunities for our members and for the region together. We do the same thing with other groups and have some announcement coming up with some European partnerships and some partnerships in the US. AgriTech NZ is part of NZ Tech, which gives us quite a bit of additional power and strength in terms of our resources in the background, but also our ability to advocate and know how to sort of form relationships and work with our public sector partners and represent all of our members, which across the whole NZ Tech family makes up 10% of the entire workforce in New Zealand. So we're a significant group together. For the members that are here, we appreciate your support. And if you're not a member, of course, we'll always encourage you to come and get actively involved, join as a member and be involved in some of these groups. I guess as part of NZ Tech, we also get access to a lot of the work that they've been doing. And so part of what I'll go through today, in addition to a quick rerun over the context in the AgriTech Industry Transformation Plan, is some of the work that NZ Tech did on the digital skills survey that they've completed recently, because that very much ties into this discussion around what are the skills and workforce requirements to really grow our AgriTech sector in the future. And so some material there that'll give us some context. In terms of the industry transformation plan, I'm not going to go through the whole plan here, just some context of where this work sits. The industry transformation plan is ultimately an economic development set of work. It's in partnership with all of government. So a really important part of that actually, because as many of you will be aware, when the different departments will work at different times on similar sectors, to bring all of that thinking together specifically for the AgriTech sector is a great moment of focus for the sector. So we're very glad to help be part of that and facilitate that. We think it's a very necessary step to really look at some of the conditions for growing the AgriTech sector. ITPs, are considered to be these sort of, long-term partnership economic development policies. They do involve investment and they do involve this partnership approach which we're facilitating, and which by being here today you're taking part in as well. And this reference group is very much part of that sort of partnership-based approach to these type of projects. The goal is to lift productivity and scale up sectors like AgriTech. It's a long-term vision with short and medium-term step changes. So I guess when we look at skills and workforce development, there's probably a mix there. There's probably some things that can happen in the short and medium term, but really we're looking at building long-term capabilities and how that ties together. There are other ITPs that are going on. So the AgriTech ITP, you'll see on the left-hand side there, is under the category of ITPs that's considered to be scaling up value. So the AgriTech sector has been identified as obviously an existing sector with potential. It's considered high value. It's exactly what the government are looking to encourage, which we see in recent immigration settings, which we see in many other policy decisions around looking at how do we scale up value. So AgriTech is in that space. And there are other ITPs. Digital ITP has been worked on currently, and as you'll see, there'll be related ones. The ones on the right are for sectors that are already at significant scale, and the challenge is how to move them from volume to value. So that's the general context of the ITPs. I think what's worth recognizing, though, is each of those will have a work stream called skills and workforce. And so a lot of what we talk about today will be common across many different sectors, and that's a very positive thing. Probably what this reference group will be asked to do will be to consider, are there additional or unique things that are specific to AgriTech, and how we can find out what those are. So that's the ongoing purpose of this reference group. Again, the ITP is made up of 6 work streams, 3 projects. I'm not going to go through those today, because today what we're focusing on is this work stream for skills and workforce, which has been led by MB. Darius, who's joining us online here, is helping drive this particular work stream. And within that work stream, there were two areas of skills and workforce that were identified. One is the skills required to develop AgriTech, and one is the skills required to use and apply AgriTech. And I guess looking at things like digital transformations in farming activities and the applications and skills around that. This reference group will specifically be addressing the former. In other words, we're looking at, to grow AgriTech businesses, do we have the right skills and workforce in place? Do we, when we think of what that's going to mean in the future, are we doing the right training and internships to make sure those skills are available? So we are very much focusing on AgriTech businesses and how we make sure they have the talent, skills, and resources to build their business. As I mentioned before, because we're part of the NZ Tech group, we've been involved in some of their digital skills work. Great piece of work. You probably can't see in the small picture there, but there is a published document that's available online. If any members want to drop us a line, we'll be happy to make sure we can send out a copy to them. And just from that, there's a couple of impact points and thoughts that I think are a good context as we sort of think about what skills and workforce considerations are really going to look like for our sector in AgriTech. And so we'll look at those in 3 areas of people, business, and government. So first of all, from a people perspective, where are we seeing people, and especially our kids and new generation coming through, the roles that they want to do? Well, digital technologies and AgriTech businesses in particular, or even tech businesses in particular, is not hitting high up on the list between 7 and 13-year-olds. And so you can see that maybe a zookeeper or a vet are getting a lot of attention from that particular age group. And when you start getting down into some of the digital tools, it's down to number 45 before you start hitting off things like IT and programmer. That's a general sector comment. It is from that particular age group. Of course, that's sort of implying that there's both an attraction and an awareness issue around what digital jobs might be. We need to look at, I guess, sexing it up to some point, both for that cohort and other cohorts. And of course, what you see around the world in other sectors, when you talk about AgriTech, even in my home country, I'm well aware that there's sort of a lot of cross transfer of skills from other sectors looking at AgriTech as something that's being attractive. And I think that's something we want to achieve for our sector as well, that of people coming out with digital skills, data science skills, and then looking at where to apply them, how do we make sure that we're attracting the best of the best to come into AgriTech? So time for the sector to be a little bit selfish and look at how it positions itself, I guess. Other general comments around skills and training in general is the declining student numbers. This is, we're seeing this across all sector groups. This is not AgriTech specific work. And so, a general trend that there is some issues here in terms of how training and skills are being developed. I think there will be some unique AgriTech components to that, and we'll mention what we think some of those are later in this presentation. but that's a general comment across many different sectors. Another topic that I have had with many of our members at this time, especially when they look at what the immigration settings are currently, particularly during COVID periods and what were considered essential workers at different times, and even as we come out of COVID and try and think, how do we make sure that we can enable more movement going forward, and hoping that there would be a preference and a consideration for exporting businesses. But there is an over-reliance on immigration, and an opportunity to both continue to harness overseas skills and bring the best of the best to New Zealand, but also to make sure that we're filling in that talent pool and growing that talent pool from within New Zealand workforce as well. So again, all of this sort of background information is across all sectors. The reference group that we're talking about will have some time and thought, I guess, on other specific elements of this that apply to the AgriTech sector. Yep, another finding, I guess, from that digital skills for a digital future from NZ EdTech is that the lack of investment in upskilling within businesses. Our AgriTech businesses in New Zealand, we have a lot of smaller businesses, some medium size, and few enough sort of what Callaghan are beginning to call our cowries, our large businesses moving to really large scale global presence. You know, our job as a sector and as an organization ourselves and with our public sector partners is to look at how we can set the conditions to grow that. So again, another consideration whether this is a particular issue for AgriTech businesses in terms of the internal skills development that might be going on. But my personal feeling is that's less of an issue within AgriTech businesses, and it's more of a comment on SMEs and other businesses around New Zealand. But again, that's the type of discussion that we would expect the reference group to be bringing some value and thought to and collecting information on. In terms of, if that's the people side of things, the business side of things, I guess when we look at AgriTech and we talk about emerging technologies, they're no longer emerging. We've seen applications across the sector here and globally where these emerging technologies are being applied in anger right now. We have businesses who are developing AI platforms. Just this week, I think I visited 5 companies across Nelson, Blenheim, and Napier, all actively doing training algorithms in AI for various applications. We saw autonomous vehicles released in or being displayed in Blenheim on the Pernod Ricard vineyard. Some amazing stuff. Of course, the population of IoT devices actively being used within the sector is great, and all the other technologies. These are things that are not just ideas, they're no longer emerging technologies. We have active solutions out there and active businesses in New Zealand developing them and wanting to do more. So it's in that background we need to make sure we've got the right skills to continue those type of developments. AgriTech as a sector itself has significant potential. From the ITP, it's categorized as having 1.4 billion of revenue from 2019, and that's been relatively steady for the last 5 years. And yet for many reasons, both in terms of international investments and real demand, it's expected that can grow. And that growth is expected to have a twofold impact for New Zealand. One is its impact on productivity and sustainability of the domestic primary sector, to support the primary sector and its goals to be fit for a better world, to address environmental issues, and to find full value from the values that we have here in New Zealand. And secondly, AgriTech is, of course, a sector in itself with the potential to and the progress already in impacting global environmental, food, and sustainability challenges. So between the combinations of those things, there is expected growth in the AgriTech sector globally. The 10 billion number that's there is definitely within scope. That number is smaller than the number of exports from a country smaller than ours called Israel in the AgriTech space. They have a similar level of investment in science and R&D in the primary sector space, and yet a tenfold greater impact in terms of businesses and trading in the AgriTech space. So plenty of room for us to grow. So that's not exactly next year's growth target, but it's definitely within scope and reality within a relatively medium-term future. So real potential of why we want to grow skills in this area. There was a slide missing from there. This is sort of putting some thought into if we're looking at people, business, and government from a government point of view. Definitely plenty of discussions going on in terms of making sure that technology is fully involved in policy thinking. And again, I could see these as being some of the topics that the reference group might work with MB on, instead of talking about how does tech inclusion get included in policy thinking. And so we see some examples here of where that's not the case. We have farm environmental plans, which is another very active topic at the moment. Where digital thinking may not be as fully ingrained as it might be. We see lots of pieces of the puzzle of good work being done in terms of positioning the country for a digital future and a digital foundations. Again, this is material from the NZ Tech work. We see the industry transformation plans, digital councils, apprenticeships, inclusions, lots of work. What NZ Tech and ourselves would like to work with our public sector partners is that national digital strategy, which definitely includes skills and the like. And so again, that's another topic that I would hope gets included in the type of reference group work. So those are sort of the three impact areas that we're thinking about when we talk about skills and workforce development. Specifically for the AgriTech skills reference group, the thinking here is that we want a group that will bring together some senior HR representatives from AgriTech New Zealand membership and businesses actively involved in growing their AgriTech business. We definitely want to make sure that we incorporate the understanding and the skills of existing work that's being done by our regional development groups, by our education and training groups, and look at having some good diversity within that and skills within that group. I'll talk a little bit about a composition in the next slide. And the real role of that group and pulling those teams together or that group together is to provide leadership and guidance on industry skills and training and projects in partnership with MB, both specific to this ITP and connected to other work across the space as well. So there's some specific asks that we have, and I'm sure there will be some fascinating topics that are coming up. So this really is a call to action for those who have insights and experience and passion in this area to get involved. And we do hope that this group will be able to be, a pathway for information from those discussions back to AgriTech New Zealand, so we can help share and engage that across the sector, represent that in the advocacy work that we do, share it with other members, and make sure it's available to the wider sector as we work in this space. Other aspects of sort of the role that we see here. So again, I'll talk about composition shortly, but we're really asking people to engage widely themselves, to bring in the knowledge they've already got, the work they've already been doing and data that they've been considering, but also to engage and to seek the views of others. And I guess it's not just representing the organization that an individual might be from, it's actually trying to represent other organizations that might be similar to yours. Today we had over 90 people register for the webinar, and so there's obviously a great deal of interest. We can't get 90 people together to do this work, so the idea of a reference group is to make sure that it has some balanced structure over different stakeholder types, that it has a level of competitive tension or alternate views within each of those stakeholder groups. And that it's of a manageable size where some real work can be done, but that it's still representative for people who might not be in the room. And so we have some specific thoughts around how that structure can work, and that'll be available in the terms of reference that we'll provide. And I'll cover some of that in the next couple of slides as well. And like we say, this definitely is a partnership between industry and government groups. So it's likely to develop and prioritize several different projects over time. couple of comments here on sort of starting hypotheses. So we don't want to, there's been previous discussions, there's been gathered in the ITP. There is discussion that I would hope the reference group will evolve itself and will bring in subject matter experts from AgriTech businesses, regional development groups, education and training groups. But I guess this is a starting point, and I'm sure it'll get discussion when the group form. Obviously, AgriTech businesses will have many of the same skills and training requirements that any other engineering or digital business does in New Zealand. We'll see that coming through in the other ITPs. There'll be a lot of shared thought. There is the proposition that AgriTech businesses do have some unique requirements, particularly in terms of interdisciplinary skills in doing that translation job of marrying up, technology solutions with biological farming systems. And that's one of the great things I see when having worked in AgriTech directly myself and working with many different AgriTech businesses now, we have a really interesting collection of people who do that sort of translation between, on the ground, earthy things, the science behind that, and then the technologies, the digital tools, the engineering tools around it. So there's some interesting translations that go on there. So I guess one of the hypotheses is there may be some unique aspects of that in terms of the particular disciplines that come together. So do we have the right match between our genetic development skills, our data science skills, animal husbandry, genomics, plant science, and are we setting the right conditions to grow those skills and talents in New Zealand to be able to do AgriTech solutions? So one of the hypotheses is there's some unique things to consider there. We're aware that there are very few AgriTech businesses that will develop a business of significance within New Zealand. It's a real constraint there, and our aspiration is to really look for that global impact. That, of course, is the same as many other New Zealand businesses as we look to grow sectors. But I guess the question here is, from across what our AgriTech groups look like now, do we have the right global leadership to build those types of businesses? Do we have the right type of connections to grow those businesses? Do we have the right insights into farming and food systems around the world? And other elements of that need to be thought about how we develop our skills and talents for the sector. Again, I found this out very much so in the last couple of months as we did our roadshow of 11 venues on the ITP. There is, whilst there is some great AgriTech being developed in Auckland and Wellington, there is significant work going on all around New Zealand in the regions, and some quite unique pockets of combinations of primary industry work, engineering work, and ag tech work coming together, and it's really interesting to see what type of things pop up. I think I know the sector really well, and yet every time I get out there, I keep on finding a new, really interesting company that is doing some amazing stuff. And so, again, a factor shared potentially with other sectors, but I think because of the nature of AgriTech and it being where food is produced and being with the people who have an understanding of that, the regions have a particularly important, really important there. So that's a consideration again to make sure that that's considered well for our sector. And then overall, we know that whatever we're doing in AgriTech right now, we're not even scratching the surface of where the demand really is globally for AgriTech solutions. We're seeing that in terms of the investment focus and AgriTech growing as an investment class massively around the world. We've been seeing that with the growth in investment and funds available here in New Zealand, which are now very complete in terms of their coverage, although I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity to deepen them across that range of coverage from early stage to scale up and growth and later stage. So, we're really primed for growth, and we need to make sure we're bringing in the right and developing the right skills and talents to achieve that. So, like I say, those are hypotheses of things that might be specific for an AgriTech skills reference group to consider. I would hope there would be more insight, testing of those, development of those to really identify what are the unique things that should be considered from an AgriTech perspective. So the composition of the reference group, our proposition there, again, to make sure that there's real work being done, is that the group would be of a workable size. It would be a representative group of 8 to 12 people. It would, in terms of business size and scope, it would cover the type of classifications we have within our own AgriTech NZ members in terms of sort of the major and large corporates, including cooperatives, our medium and small corporates, which includes a lot of our CRIs and other businesses in that space, and independent research groups, and then our small and early stage businesses, which make up the lion's share of a lot of the AgriTech sector currently. We're also very aware, whilst we have many regional development groups who are members of AgriTech New Zealand and NZ Tech, and also many education and training groups, that those are groups that have specifically got a lot of plans and insights into what their regions require, and have their own plans in place. Education and training groups, of course, have their own strategies and are working with many others. So we definitely want to make sure we're not reinventing anything and bringing in those skills and groups. So again, like all of these sectors, I think to have all of the regional development groups, all of the education sources, all of the different company scales is obviously not feasible. So we're really looking for a truly representative group. I think when we look across those sort of, if it stands at those 5 that I mentioned, that I highlight there in terms of the different corporate sizes, regional development and education, at least 2 from each, to make sure that we've got some balance there. And those will be the type of considerations, I guess, when we see who has an expression of interest and who engages on this work, and that's how we'll structure the composition of the group, and also making sure that there is full diversity represented in there across all considerations. We know that everything is stronger with diverse input, and in this context, especially with the consideration of future development, the youth aspect is definitely considered in that, as well as balance and inclusion in many other areas to get that diversity, that strength through diversity. Little bit of detail in terms of sort of the frequency and format. Once the group is formed, we presume that within that group they'll be able to determine a chair and a vice chair. We would suggest that for any team, a kickoff meeting face-to-face is probably a good way to go, so people get to know each other and get to do some real good work and build up some understanding and trust at the outset. So kick off with a face-to-face meeting. There is an initial period of data gathering that we think is required. That will be supported by MB. There will be existing material available, and I'm sure people will bring material. And the proposition is that to look for some of those nuances or specifics for the agri-tech sector, that some engagement with the sector in the form of a survey is a good thing to do. So that's again the hypothesis or the suggestion, and it's expected that a couple of sessions, maybe a little bit more intense at the beginning during June and July, should get to the design of that, the consideration of what that would cover, and that would fuel further work. Following on from that, things will move more into video conferences to progress the survey, analyze what comes out of the survey, and identify any other work or linkages with other work that needs to be done going forward. And if the requirements change from that, it would just be mutually agreed with the group. So the process from today, we have some terms of reference that explains many of the things that I've just sort of gone through here, and an expression of interest form that people can fill out. But if you want to activate it straight away, please just drop an email to info@agritechnz.org.nz. That's where the expression of interest will be coming from. If you're aware of people that you think should be involved in this, definitely please tell them and forward on any of the materials that you will get as a result out of today's session. We are looking to have those expressions of interests before May 28th. That's tomorrow week. That's to enable the kickoff meeting during June and to get into some of that work in June, July. And we will, so our goal within that timeline is to have sort of being able to look at all the different people who are interested and work with them to form that reference group by June 4th. That is the material that I've been have here. As I've been talking away, I haven't been paying any attention to the chat or the thing, so I see there's questions coming through. Is that email address correct? Good question, Sarah. Let me have a look. I think it is. Thank you, Sarah. Nope, you can drop the E in org. It is so. The info at agritechnz.org.nz. Cheers, Sarah. This has ended up being a little bit of a thank you for the interest from Massey there. Got that. If anybody else wants to pop their name into the chat, this is all recorded, so we will get we will be capturing this and get a transcript from there. So if this is something that you'd like to be involved in, please just drop your name in there, and that'll be captured. Like I say, we're very keen on any thoughts or comments. So please ask questions here if you want. Reach out to us through that email address, and you will receive materials from us following this session, and feel free to forward those on to anybody that you wish. Yep, thank you for that request, Rod. We're happy to. We will, in addition to sending out this material, this session has been recorded, so we'll make sure that that's available also. Now, if you guys don't ask more questions, we will wrap things up. Like I say, thank you for attending today. I think this is going to be some good work, and we look forward to reporting back on progress. Thank you for your time today, everybody.